Good morning. I'm absolutely delighted to be back in Cornwall. I used to come every year to your health and wellbeing events, and then of course COVID happened. So it's a long time since I've been here, and you've raised the weather for me. It's beautiful. So I'm really here to try and give an overall view, and I was really delighted to be given my own title as Working for a Healthier Tomorrow. This is the front cover of my original report, which was published in 2008. I'm really looking forward to understanding the Inclusivity Project, but I went back to see what I said in 2008 about inclusivity, and I was very pleased to find I did mention it. In 2008, it is there in that report, and it really was about promoting health and well-being for all. It was about increasing employment opportunities for all, but making sure that work is good work. So it really, I've been interested in it, I suppose we could say, since 2008, and it's good for individuals, it's good for families, it affects our quality and indeed our quantity of life. It's good for employers, and it's definitely good for society. So I was very pleased to see that I mentioned it then. So the focus of our attention today is, as you know, the 50 plus, and I'm well beyond that. So I'm sort of standing here as an older worker, workers with long-term conditions and disabilities. Who of us among the audience, perhaps some of the very young, don't have any disabilities, but as you get older, we will all acquire them. And then to really concentrate, and Chris will say much more later about SMEs, but it has been one of the most challenging areas to really think, what do we do to support the small and micro organisation, and indeed the middle-sized workplace? Well, the needs of the older worker, honestly, are they not the needs of every worker? Why do we have to sort of put an ageism lens on it? Surely as an older worker, you want autonomy, you want control, you want recognition, you would like the ability to train, to have some new skills, you want social contact, you want equal opportunities. It's not unreasonable to think post-50, why should these things suddenly be cut off? Flexibility is important to all workers. And of course, support to manage your own health and well-being at work. I did write a great deal in 2008 about, for those with chronic disease or disability. It seemed to me that as good work is good for us generally, it's very good and can be therapeutic for those people who have got chronic disease. I've been doing a lot of work recently, as many of you will know, with drugs. That is drugs like heroin and cocaine. When you talk to people who have a drug dependency, if they get clean and free of their drug dependency, they will tell you they need something purposeful to do. They need a meaning, a purpose in life. People past 50, not all, but many will tell you they would like to have a purpose in life. Work is an important part of that. Of course, I understand not for everyone, but it can help promote recovery and rehabilitation, and we shouldn't forget that. And it can minimize the unwanted and harmful effects of long-term sickness. Last year, I had a total knee replacement. I'm not sure that I was a very good patient, but I did really understand that now I had a chronic condition, and I was on crutches for a while. It took a while for me to adapt, but I wanted to feel included. It was valuable. It was lockdown. I could do most of my work online, but I didn't want that temporary inconvenience to stop me doing things. But there are many, many people with not temporary conditions who need support. And I think there is absolutely no reason why with a long-term disability you shouldn't be in work. As you know, in the 2008 report, I said very clearly you don't have to be 100% fit to work. That's why I wanted the sick note changed to a fit note. What is it that people can do rather than what they can't do? Now, I talked to my friends at Ipsos Mori, who do, of course, a lot of work on getting people's opinions, if they could give me some figures on the disability employment gap. So these figures came mainly from points that they had given me. I don't think it will come as any surprise to you. Men, older people, unqualified people, the demographics of the UK, there are certain things that make that disability employment gap worse for some people. People with autism or learning disabilities have very low employment rates. And I think, although I have to confess I haven't actually checked these figures, that those with a drug or alcohol drug dependency or an alcohol dependency would have an even lower rate of employment, much less likely to be in full-time work or highly skilled work, and they move out of work at about twice the rate of non-disabled workers. About 19,000 organisations are in the Disability Confidence Scheme. Does that really work well? You will know that better than I. Does it really make a difference to the people in work? And the Find a Job website in July of this year showed 208,000 vacancies, 16% with disability confident organisations. But I'm quite sure that of the current 1.3 million total vacancies, many, many could be suitable for people with disabilities or long-term conditions, if only the relevant support was there. Of course, access to work was one of the government's best kept secrets. I always used to think it was really kept secret if you had a mental health condition. I think that has got somewhat better, and appropriate job redesign. So there's a great deal to be done. But I put it to you all that the UK needs its older workers. In the last 10 years, the UK population aged 50 to 69 has grown by 1.7 million, while the population of the 20 to 49-year-olds has fallen. Meanwhile, the state pension age, as you know, has risen to 66. So really, you could make an argument that the older workforce is the workforce. And multi-generational working is truly, truly important. There are several good papers and reports that show that multi-generational workforces drive productivity and innovation. There was a good report by the Resolution Foundation last year on this issue. And businesses with a 10% higher than average share of workers over 50 or 1.1% more productive. So multi-generational teams are most innovative. And in the world I came from, which was the world of medicine, you really, as a young doctor, needed the older doctor, the older person. You needed to learn. It was as much a craft as it was an academic pursuit. But I put it to you that the UK doesn't use this opportunity, and our shortage of labour and skills have reached records high. It's been mentioned by several speakers that we are now, of course, we hope, post-pandemic, so I have used that word. And I rely greatly in giving you this talk on the Centre for Ageing Better. I chair the board, but I don't, of course, do the work. We do have Luke here from the Centre today, so he could give you a lot more detail about the work we're doing, but this is courtesy of Emily Andrews, and she has certainly provided me with a lot of the material I'm using today. So there are 230,000 fewer people, as you all know, aged 50 to 64 participating in the workforce than at the start of the pandemic. Unemployment may be low, but participation is low. 3/4 of businesses report recruitment issues. Now, DWP has, as you know, been taking steps, but it's been taking it through Job Centre Plus. Therefore, that doesn't help the disengaged older worker necessarily. It is helping a certain percentage of the would-be workforce, but we really need targeted action for 50% job seekers. And they need to be backed up by employment and training support for those who are not claiming benefits, and broader action taken to tackle ageism in the labour market. If we look in the gap in employment rate by age, it did narrow substantially. It was going in the right direction. But since the pandemic, it's widened to 14 percentage points since the start of the pandemic. So that is the gap between the older and the younger worker. And then there are some people that particularly fall into that gap more than others, and you can see there, let me just move it on. Sorry, it doesn't. There we are. It's women, people from the BAME background, people with long-term health conditions. That again will come as absolutely no surprise to you. I'm sure the Inclusivity Project found what I'm going to say now, although I haven't seen the results. The reason why people aged 50 to 64 give you for being out of work, and this is the work of the centre, unemployed and actively job seeking, they're more likely than young people to become long-term unemployed. And when they try to support access to employment support, their outcomes are worse. Sick, injured, or disabled, it's assumed they may not want to work, but you can't make that assumption. And then, of course, we've all been conscious in the pandemic that caring responsibilities have increased, and that's increased mainly, I think, for women. So they're then trying to do caring responsibilities as well as perhaps try to be in some form of employment. And then the retired. Of course, retirement can be a very positive choice, and we have seen that with the pandemic. But I was reading only last weekend in the newspapers how people who'd made that choice because of the financial constraints that are coming upon us, and because of the challenges we face, they are going to have to be going back and looking again for work. So I think perhaps overconfidence about financial security is a problem. And some retirees find they're not necessarily welcomed when they stay in the workplace. So again, looking at the work of the centre, these are just some of the quotes in a piece of work called Too Much Experience of Why People Were Not Getting Jobs. Quote, "You are a little too experienced, really, to be coming into the role. On this occasion, we're going to find someone that we can train into the position." Because it's not telling you the truth of why they're not giving you the job. "We're looking for someone younger because we actually feel they would fit more to the job." What on earth does that mean? I mean, but it is ageism. And too few employers are motivated and acting on opportunities for a workforce. When you talk often to organisations, they will tell you they're doing the right thing. But actually, as you can see here, only half of employees have a diversity and inclusion policy targeting age. They have all sorts of other inclusion and diversity policies. Only 1 in 6 are very likely to develop age-friendly policies in the next 12 months. And 40% of employers are willing to say ageism is a problem in their own industry, but it's not really a problem in their organization. I mean, it is really interesting that we can think it's a problem, but when we have to look at ourselves, no, it's not a problem. I wish you all could have read this article. This is a wonderful article by a very good journalist called Lucy Kellaway, who wrote in the Financial Times last weekend, she usually writes at the weekend. This was in January, and she was writing on ageism. And what Lucy said, you can see here, that this survey, a WHO survey, found that every second person holds ageist attitudes, while according to the National Barometer of Prejudice and Discrimination 2018 study undertaken for Britain's Equality and Human Rights Commission, 26% of people experienced age discrimination in a year. And survey after survey establishes this very same thing. People over 50 find it harder to get job interviews, unless, of course, as she put in the article, they're applying to be president of the US, and are more likely to be eased out of jobs. But actually, towards the end of that article, this is what she said, and this is about all of us who are, in fact, over the age of 50. The most lethal thing about ageism is how quickly we apply that stereotype to ourselves. Older people are often the most ageist of all because we've had a lifetime of absorbing negative messages about age and aging. The older people are incompetent or out of touch, for example, and you stop questioning those awful messages. So let me tell you about myself. I question whether I should wear shoes with heels, because I'm really well over the age when, you know, people wear high heel shoes, and perhaps I should be wearing flat shoes, because that would be more in keeping with my age. I often just want to wear purple just to show, you know, that I can really wear anything I would like to wear. I find it very difficult to go and buy a decent pair of fitted trousers that fit me at my age. I assume I won't be able to do that because I am of a certain age, so I'm just as bad as anyone else at thinking that I'm an older person. But I think the really serious message is, as she said in this very good article, these attitudes towards ourselves aren't just limiting, they shorten our lives. And there's research to show that. And the Centre is about to launch, we are going to do a big campaign against ageism, because it is so rife in every aspect of our lives. Now, SMEs, and I'm not going to say much about them because Chris will talk about them this afternoon, but I think from our research at the Centre, they certainly face particular challenges. We know they're crucial to the labour market. Our own UK employers survey, it's over 2,000 employers, showed that SMEs are less likely to believe ageism in the workplace is an issue that needs to be tackled, much more likely to believe that there are no key issues faced by older workers than employers with over 250 staff, and less likely to agree that older workers can help meet the future workforce challenge. So we really need to try and move away from that. And less likely to have age-inclusive policies or plans in place. 40% of SMEs have diversity inclusion policies, including age, compared to 57% of larger organisations. And from that survey, they seemed less likely to be intending to create age-inclusive policies in the next 12 months. And of course, as many SMEs can't perhaps afford or have occupational health, there's no protection coming from that. Now, just a word on the government. Well, I think the government's approach has been very mixed and uncertain. You would call the legislation to enhance access to flexible work, create statutory carers leave was dropped in the Queen's speech, although it did appear to be coming back. They have invested in employment support after the pandemic. There was the Restart scheme, extra support for the 50-plus age group at Job Centre Plus. But as I said earlier on, the real challenge is participation. And there's been a considerable underspend on Restart, and that could have been used to help older people seek jobs. The government's response to the Health Everyone's Business consultation, you recall we have a unit of health and work, a joint unit in government, but that consultation commits to improved information and advice, and they want to test and evaluate a subsidy for SMEs and self-employed workers to access occupational health support, but I haven't seen much come from that. So I think it's rather limited. I'm going to move really very quickly through this because, as I say, Luke is here from the centre, but we've been trying at the centre to do work on these big groups of the unemployed but looking for jobs, sick, injured or disabled, caring responsibility, or the retired. And on the right hand of the following slides, you will see, and you can find them on our web pages, the publications that we have on these. But certainly in those that are actively job seeking, we've got a big program of work with Manchester, with Greater Manchester. We have a big program of work in the West Midlands, supported there by Barclays, and we've also been looking at upskilling employability of workers. But it does work out that we consider that you need intensive tailored support from trained advisors that can take place in very diverse settings. So you've got to make it individual and focus on confidence building, because naturally people have been knocked back a lot when they go and look for jobs, and navigation of the job market in a digital age. But we have got lots of good things, I think, on our website. And then if we look at the sick, injured or disabled, or people who are looking after their family, we have certainly a flexible work toolkit for employers, and we've got some insights and the experiences of what the 50-year-olds tell us about trying to be in work with long-term conditions. And finally, in this group, those who are retired, we've got a very good recruitment guide for the older worker called Grow, support for usual midlife MOTs, which are quite popular in some organisations, and age-friendly employment and inclusive guidance. So I can't go through all of those anyway, it would be inappropriate, but there is that material out there. And to summarise it, I suppose we put it together in how you can be an age-friendly employer. And again, this is what I mentioned at the beginning: flexible working, regard age positively, not negatively, ensure that people have health support, career development, and an age-positive culture. And then I suppose I'm going to make a plea. I'm going to end this by really talking to you about work. This is going to start in Cornwall, which comes from the work I've done on drugs for the government. So in 2015-16, commissioned by the then Prime Minister, but through DWP, I did a report on enabling people in the benefits system who were alcohol or drug dependent move into work, and it was really, you couldn't easily find work for these people at all. Employers were naturally worried, and we realized that we had to try and show that with appropriate support, you could place people who had been drug dependent or alcohol dependent, or indeed been in prison because of that, in work, and that they would be reliable workers. So we've had over the last 4 years a big trial of what's called individual placement support, which is specialist support for people with health-related barriers to work. And just thinking about the case for change, there is a significant employment gap, and you can see what it is for Cornwall there, about 74%. But we know that if we can get people who've had such problems into work, then we do much better with their long-term recovery. The evidence that good quality work is good for health and well-being, and for economic gain and a safer society. People who we can help give up their addiction are not committing murder. 50% of murders, remember, are committed by drug-dependent people. They're not committing serious violent crime. 49% serious violent crime is committed by people who are on drugs. A third of our prison places are taken up by people with a drug problem. You can see here where we come in the countries of regularly employed for new or representations for all drugs. 13% Portugal, which of course has a rather different approach to drug dependency, 29%. So individual placement support basically started in the world of mental health, people with schizophrenia, long-term enduring mental ill health, and showed in big-scale trials to be very, very useful. And so I recommended to government that we should try and use it for people who had drug problems. And so we've seen IPS expanded into mental health services in this country. And indeed, it's being expanded into military veterans, musculoskeletal problems, and ex-offenders. And the 2001 New Drug Strategy commits to this expansion everywhere in the country of IPS in drug and alcohol treatment, and that followed my 2021 review, and indeed it's coming and is in Cornwall. So I just really wanted you to know that Cornwall, if you didn't know, and Torbay Council submitted a successful expression of interest to DHSC in 2020. Cornwall is the lead authority, and the National Substance Use Charity With You is being funded by Cornwall to employ a team of trained IPS specialists who are working with people, services and business around Cornwall to help clients into work and to help businesses recruit. So I suppose this is a pitch to say to you, drug dependency and alcohol dependency are health conditions. Therefore, we should try as best we can to enable people with these health conditions who are on the road to recovery to have meaningful activity, i.e. work. So I just hope that as there are employers in the room today, you will be willing to be creative and think about that as we move forward. So I'm sorry, I hope I haven't greatly overgone my time. Happy to answer any questions now or in the coffee breaks or at lunchtime. But I hope I've given you an overall view. I hope some of this chimes with the Inclusivity Project, because I shall feel very silly if it doesn't. And thank you very much for listening. We've got got 5 minutes, so if anybody does have a question, you do need somebody to deliver you a microphone, but very happy to try and be helpful. I've quietened everybody down. No. Oh, yes, Chris.
Carol, you gave a number of indicators of what makes a good workplace, particularly relating to older workers, but you also mentioned that really the reality of our workforce is that we're becoming an older workforce. So are the principles you put out there, are they really sort of, do they have wider applicability as well in terms of, we're talking here often about disabled and what have you. So with those criteria that you have up there about what good work is for older workers.
Yes, and although we haven't gone into it, I mean, I'm sure you and I would agree that it's the same thing, isn't it, about the leadership in any organisation, treating all workers the same. It's the fact that I do believe the boards, and of course this would apply more to big and middle-sized companies, but the top of the house needs to hear about the health and well-being of all workers. And then managers need to be trained to be people managers. And I think what we never do, or we haven't done so far, is to ever make sure that is inclusive of all workers. We tend to think that our managers are trained more for the sort of 24 to 50s. We have done very little to say you really need to think that this is inclusive of everyone. But I think we nearly all, whatever our age, want similar things. That you could be a young insulin-dependent diabetic, couldn't you? Your needs would be the same. You want that to be well treated at work. Thank you. I think that's.
Was there another hand up?
There's a gentleman.
Oh, sorry, Dan. I was just going to check as well whether there's any questions online from any of our online audience. If there are, we'll do that one next.
Thank you very much for that. It was really interesting. I think when thinking about older workers, I was really glad to see you focus on economically inactive people as well, because often we think about just the unemployed, which is actually a relatively small proportion of those older workers not in employment. So to what extent do you think that we've got the right balance between focusing on people who are 50 to 64 but unemployed relative to who've left the labour market for other reasons?
No, I know. I mean, it's always been easier, hasn't it, for government to really think about people who are in the system, so to speak, and are sort of turning up to the job centres. Because they're, you can get at them. But I think there are quite a lot of people who, with the right encouragement and made to feel it would be all right, would certainly like and benefit from going back to work. But I think we all know if we have to take a time off work for illness or whatever, going back can be quite. It's got lots of challenges, and of course I think it's more difficult. So I don't think we've got the split really right. Were there any questions online?
Yeah, Story. Lots of lovely comments and people saying how they've enjoyed your speech. But Val has got a question. Val online says, how important is it that a return to work assessment is conducted so that the tasks match the capability of the worker and are adjusted accordingly?
So have I got... I understand that the return to work needs to be done very well. I mean, is that the essence, that it needs to be adapted?
Yeah, asking how important you feel it is.
Yeah, no, I think it is crucially important. It's a bit like when you practice medicine in outpatients, the last question was usually the most informative. As the person's leaving the room, you could always say to them, is there anything else you'd like to tell me? I can tell you, that's when you got the real bits. So it is always important to make sure it is relevant to the person and not a tick box exercise of, do you fill these 10 criteria?
Great. Hopefully that answered Val's question. That's it at the moment online.